Hey everybody, welcome to SuperHuman You coaching. I am on the line today with a man named Dan Henry, and full disclosure on me, I didn't really know anything about Dan until a couple of months ago. I knew that he was involved in the ClickFunnels world. I knew that he was one of the names that kept popping up as people who were doing well with it. But it wasn't until I saw him speak at Funnel Hacking Live in Nashville in February of 2020 that I was able to get a taste of what he had to offer. He was kind enough to gift this book, advanced copies of this book, to everyone in attendance, and it's a phenomenal book. I have it sitting over here, literally sitting. These are the two books that it's sitting next to: Expert Secrets and Think and Grow Rich. So these are books that I go to literally every day to draw information and inspiration from. So I'm really excited. Part of the launch of Dan's book, which is available now at digitalmillionairesecrets.com. Is that right, Dan?
That's correct.
And it's available for free, right? If anybody wants it, they just go and they pay for some shipping, and you'll send a copy of it out to them, right?
Yeah, pay the postman, and I'll cover the cost of the actual book. No problem. Send it right out.
Fantastic. And what impacted me the most about the way that the information in this book, and also the stuff that you talked about, was the innovative slant that you put on things that were already in existence. So you are clearly evolving the nature of the online training business, and I'm really excited to be able to latch onto that early on in my evolution as someone who's transitioned from doing mostly in-person stuff to moving more things online. So really excited about that, really appreciative of that. Like I said, I didn't know anything about you until I saw you speak, and then I started reading the book, and upon reading the book, some very interesting things about your backstory impacted me personally. I didn't know you were a musician.
Yeah,
so that's really cool.
Here it is.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So yeah, we could probably talk on and on for hours about gear and all that sort of stuff. I've got sitting right over here. This is my Christmas gift from my wife. It's a
nice
Fender EVH Wolfgang. I'm 50 years old, so I was in the 80s shred stuff. So just real quick,
the squeal decade.
That's right. But before we go too deep into the important stuff here, what kind of music are you into?
I mean, I'm into a lot of different types of music. I'm into like rock and heavier rock and metal, jazz, blues, some of this spacey stuff. A recent friend got me into. I don't even know what it's called, but it's like this spacey chill out music stuff. But my favorite band's Tool. I like Tool, Deftones. I was that, like, I don't know if you call it new metal, but I was like the 90s were awesome, and then the grunge era, and then the early 2000s were awesome, and then it just went.
Yeah. I was there for all the 80s hair band stuff, and then I was there for when Pantera.
I wasn't a fan of the 80s hair band stuff. That I was more of a fan of the grunge. When the grunge came along and got rid of those guys, I was like, oh, finally.
Yeah. I was there when the grunge thing happened. I was in my early 20s, so I remember when Pantera broke, and I remember when Alice in Chains took over the world. So it was a great
that's
era.
What I'm talking about.
That's my favorite rock. So I got to see all those guys too back in the day before they died.
Yeah, I've seen Tool twice, and I had VIP front row backstage tickets in Orlando, and then 2 days later, regular tickets in Tampa coming up in April, and then all this stuff happened. So I don't think I'm going to get to see those shows.
I was actually supposed to be in Tampa this weekend, but the event that I was going to perform at got canceled or rescheduled. So anyway, we're in the midst of all that stuff right now. If you're watching this on the replay, we are in the 18th of March. So we are in the thick of people trying to figure out what's going on with the coronavirus stuff. But we're not going to talk about any of that stuff because it's not really relevant to the conversation. I want to go back to your backstory and ask you the first question. The premise of everything that I do with SuperHuman You has to do with I came into a personal development frame of mind with my business after being a performing strongman and an entrepreneur, gym owner, and teaching workshops for fitness related things for years. And one of the superpowers that I have is spotting the similarities and patterns in things that may not be so readily apparent, rather than talking about the differences. And so I spotted similarities between the mental aspect of strongman training, the mental aspect of personal development, and the mental aspect of becoming an entrepreneur, and what that does for the individual as they progress through that sort of stuff. In this book, you talk about how you were sleeping in your car and selling water bottles on the side of the road just a few years ago, trying to make ends meet. And now I saw you receive your 2CCX award at Funnel Hacking Live, which means to the uninitiated that you did $10 million through a single funnel. So what is, and I know that you don't go from sleeping in your car and selling water bottles to 10 million in revenue without a radical shift in mentality and the way that you think about things and the way that you see things. So could you speak about the difference and the evolution in your thought process going from from where you were to where you are now?
Yeah, I think the main thing is, it's kind of, I think back to college, and I remember, it's like, all right, you got this test coming up and there's all these things you got to do to prepare for the test. And, you sit there and you think, I don't really want to do this stuff. This is hard, and you think about why this and that is hard, and, what you can avoid and how you can avoid pain and how you can avoid these things that you don't want to do. And that's what a normal everyday person does. We wake up in the morning and we go through life and we think about all the pain and all the hard stuff that we can just not do and avoid. And that's just a normal mindset of a normal average American person. And I had that mindset. I wanted to avoid pain. I wanted to not do things that were hard. I wanted life to be as easy as possible on me. And when I got to a point where I wanted more and I wasn't getting it because I maintained that avoidance mindset, I was just planing along. And then as I was doing the things, that I needed to do in life to get by, I got hit with an IRS bill because I had owned a bar at one point. And I guess I just did not hire a good accountant because the IRS sent me a letter and disallowed all my liquor costs, all my rent, just everything. It was the weirdest audit ever, but they did. And they said, you have to prove all of this. And I didn't have my paperwork. I didn't have the money to hire a tax attorney, none of that. And so I thought, how do I make this money? And that was when I was backed into a corner. And, there's a lot of animals in the animal kingdom that are very, very calm and very peaceful. But if you back them into a corner, they will tear your butt up, And so that was what happened. And it caused me to have to do things I didn't want to do. It caused me to have to, not stay up and have a beer and watch South Park and chill and just de-stress for the day, man, and actually work and study and read books and do what I needed to do very fast because I had to figure this out very fast. And when I came out on the other end, a month later, when I actually got to it, I had made over $100,000. And I was like, wait a minute, let's back up. My whole life, all I did, and I would tell my friends, be like, man, I just need to chill today. I just let me relax, and now when I run into those people, I feel like saying, no, you don't deserve to relax, get to work. Because when I actually did get to work, I achieved things that were beyond what I could ever have imagined or ever hoped for. And then when I realized that, and I went, all right, well, if I can make $100,000 in a month putting in this effort, imagine if I really put in effort. And so I embraced the hard. Everything I didn't want to do, I did. The boring books that, one reason I wrote my book the way I wrote it, if you look at the chapters, they're very easy to read. There's each paragraph is 1 to 3 sentences. It's written like a copywriter, because I am a copywriter, and it's extremely easy to read visually. Yes. But when you grab a book that the paragraph takes up half the page and it's all smashed together, it causes reading fatigue. And so I used to hate reading books because it was like, so what I started doing was either doing it anyway, or I would listen to the audiobook. I'd work out and listen to the audiobook while I was working out. In fact, I still do it. I listen to tons of audiobooks. I'm listening to 2 right now since I've been working out the past couple of weeks. And I started embracing that. And when I did, great things started happening. And that's when I realized when you do the stuff that nobody else wants to do, that's when you make the most progress, because your competitors and the people that are competing against you won't want to do most of those things. And so if you just embrace that, you are already ahead of the game. I mean, how many people do you know that if you say, hey man, you should read more books, they're just like, yeah, no, dude, do you realize how many millions of dollars of knowledge there are out there in books that cost under $20? If you don't read a book a week, there's an alternate version of you that does read a book in some alternate reality that's making you look like a total loser. I'm just saying.
Absolutely. Now, did you find that once you flipped that switch, well, first of all, you backed into a corner, didn't really have a choice. And one of the things that when I do feats of strength that I learned from my mentors early on is there is this ability within us to express more physical power than we believe that we're capable of. And people say it that they're pushing past their limits. I don't really believe they're pushing past a physical limit, because if you're pushing past a physical limit, something in you breaks by definition. But
right.
The fact is you didn't know where your physical limit were, and you were able to exceed what your perceived limit was.
100% agreed. 100% agreed.
So one of the things that I understand from that strongman training that applies to every other, like I said, there's patterns and there's similarities, is that very often we hear the urban legends of the woman who's never lifted a weight in her life, and her car winds up on top of her child and she picks it up and pulls the child out from under. I've actually researched and there are actual documented cases of that. That's not just urban legend stuff, but that's a story for another time. But a quote from one of my mentors that I'm paraphrasing here is that a life and death situation will clear your mind of your self-imposed limits. And the only thing that you can think about is your survival. And that crisis can breed an incredible amount of creativity and drive, because there's no other choice. It's do this thing or die. But in the case you're talking about, it's do this thing or the IRS comes and gets me, and that's never good, right?
Yeah, that's not good at all.
So the question then that I want to throw at you is, once you started embracing the hard part, as you said, and you started doing that, did you find that the things that were difficult to do suddenly became much easier to do with practice and repetition?
Not only did they become easier to do with practice and repetition, but they immediately became easier to do just the very first time I tried them, because what makes it seem hard, what makes it feel hard, is your perception that it's hard. And when you let go of that perception, you kind of realize it's not actually that hard. Mm-hmm. It really, like I always say, it is not hard to become a millionaire. What's hard is getting out of your own way.
I love that. I love that. And if you had a handheld mic, I would encourage you to just do this with it right now. That's absolutely brilliant. I think that there's this idea in the minds of people who haven't learned to embrace that you hear speakers and you hear entrepreneurs talk about the 24/7 hustle and the grind and all of this kind of stuff, which I believe is incredibly damaging to the individual in the long run. I think, and it sounds like you're saying the same thing in a different way, I think that if you can take the things that you believe are difficult, well, like there's the story about the guy who wants to be successful, and he goes and he meets with the guru, and the guru takes him to the lake and shoves him under the water and lets him up right before he dies and says, when you want success as bad as you want it to breathe, then you'll be successful. I think that's complete horseshit. I think that when your desire to become successful is as ingrained and natural as your breathing, to where that's just what you do. And if you stop and think about it, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm moving in that direction. I'm thinking that way. But then if you think about something else, that just continues to run in the background. I think that the truly successful people have figured out how to plug into that. And I think that what you just said is just reinforces that. So I appreciate your validation of my observations.
Mindset is everything, you know, and I'll add this, the following thing that I say sometimes gets me in hot water, but I'll say it anyway.
Good.
So I view lazy as layers, right? The word lazy, because I don't believe you should just grind, right? And here's why. Let's say that you have your own bricklaying company, or let's say you're a brick builder, right? And you have your own brick company, and you're making money, but you don't know how to really run a company. And so you're working 8 to 10 hours a day laying brick, and you don't take any time to read books or anything like that. You're spending 8 to 10 hours a day physically taking your hands and moving brick. Now, would most people say that a man or woman that spends 8 to 10 hours a day is not, moving heavy brick is not lazy? Would you say they're not lazy?
From a physical exertion standpoint, yes, they're working hard.
Well, maybe from a physical exertion standpoint, but from an overall standpoint, I still think that's extraordinarily lazy. Because you have a skill, you built a company, and you're working hard enough to move brick, but you're not willing to read some books on how to run a company. You're not willing to read some books on maybe a better way to make money, a faster way to make money, a simpler way to make money, a way to make money with less friction. You could easily teach other brick builders how to build their own brick company. You could easily research books on how to grow your company. You could read anything from the number one book you should always read, and that's Made in America by Sam Wall. You could read all these books, and in the course of a few weeks, improve your processes, get out of the bricklaying business, continue the business to run by building a team, and spend time with your family. That to me is somebody that's not lazy. Okay. That to me is somebody that truly is not lazy. Lazy comes in layers. And unless you're continually trying to grow and refine, the day you stop, unless you're retired, that is lazy to me. And that is the expectation I put on myself. Every day I try to make this whole machine work smoother with less moving parts and more profitable. And the day that I stopped doing that, and I did stop doing that, there was a moment where I had a year and a half where we were sitting pretty at a multiple 6-figure months, and I didn't have to do anything, and I just sat around. But, then the industry started changing, and I had to change with it, and I had to, get back to it. And that's the thing is there's multiple layers of lazy, and you can't just look at physical exertion or this or that. You have to look at the big picture. Like, because imagine if you worked all day, every day, and you had a little daughter, and that daughter thinks to herself, well, my dad was never around because he was always working. But he could have been around if he just picked up a book, if he just put more effort into learning how to refine the process. Mm-hmm. To me, that's lazy.
I agree completely. And I think that there's this badge of honor that goes along with the proverbial hard work. And, there's a
badge covered in dirt.
It is. And I believe that, that at the root of that is a self-image that if I work hard and I'm honest, then I will be successful. And work hard is the mentality that you're talking about. If I'm working 8 hours a day, how do I work harder? I work for 10 hours a day, right? And that puts you into this counterproductive loop. And before we go any further on that, if there is a bricklayer or anyone else who's watching this that is tapped out on their time and feels like they're working too hard and they want to do what Dan just said and maybe start teaching other people how to do their own bricklaying company, in this book.
Yeah, I'm not trying to bash you. I'm trying to help you. Because,
yes, absolutely.
Yes.
I was, when I was a gym owner, I was the guy who I did everything, and wound up bringing a few people on before I got completely out of that business. And it brings its own set of challenges, but yeah, you're right. That is the hitting that ceiling and saying, well, this is where I'm going to be. I don't want to evolve anymore is the level of lazy that you're talking about.
And just for clarity, if you take a look at my hands, I did work. I've done everything from land clearing to I did some roofing for a while, and my hands definitely do not. My hands are definitely not baby hands.
Absolutely. Well, to go on to the next question then, because you mentioned this earlier when you were talking about your evolution as an entrepreneur. You said that the business itself changed and you changed with it and became more successful because you were just kind of sitting back and relaxing. And you saw that the business, not your business, but like the business environment that you're a part of started changing. So you talk about this in the book. I noticed it immediately when I saw you speak at Funnel Hacking Live. You pride yourself on being an innovator in a rapidly growing, rapidly changing business environment. I mean, the environment of doing things online as a business now is radically different than it was, 10 years or even 5 years ago. If you buy a book on how to do online marketing from 10 years ago, there's no real mention of social media. There's no real mention of a lot of the tools that we use on a daily basis now. So going back to the mental approach and the mind approach to all this stuff is, where do your innovative ideas come from? Because they come regularly and they're very powerful when they do. And so where do they come from, and how do you know when an innovative idea that you have that may go against or counter to what seems like what everyone else is doing? Where does that come from in your thought process?
Well, first you have to have the willingness to be innovative. That's number one. There's this old saying about, stick to the plan, don't reinvent the wheel and all that. And that is, for the most part, true. I mean, I definitely encourage my clients and my students to stick to the plan and stick to the system and do what I say. But, at a certain point, when you hit that limit, I'll give you an example. I don't own a ginormous company like Russell Brunson does, right? He has like 200 employees and it's a big company. I have like 10 employees. I try to keep myself as lean and mean as possible. And as, a small company that is very profitable. I don't have any desire to be the next Steve Jobs or anything like that. That's not what I want to do. Now, that said, we pushed the limits. Last February, not this last February, but the February before that, we hit I guess you would call it probably the highest peak you could hit doing what I do, selling an info product as just like not a big corporation, just a guy, right? And that was $1 million in a month. Now, when you hit the peak and when you're at the top and, you've hit the limit of what most people in the industry have hit, you start to realize that a lot of what got you there was little tweaks and little innovations, and it opens up your mind to realize that, it's okay to innovate. It's okay to experiment, because there's really only 0 to a handful of people out there that are hitting those type of numbers. So if there's nobody to say, hey, do this instead, you are forced to innovate. And that's where I said, all right, well, now it's time to really, do my own thing and start experimenting with crazy stuff. And that's the funny thing is, there's 2 types of people. There's people that look at what somebody's doing, try to copy it, make money. And then there's people who just pay the person they're looking at to show them how. And it's a funny story because I experiment with things all the time. It's like my little lab. And I remember one time I tried this thing that did not work at all. I tried it for like a week, and it just, I could tell right away it was not good. Well, about 3 weeks later, I see this ad, and it's this guy selling it was like $47, And it was just like, I hacked Dan Henry's whatever funnel and I break it all down and I'm just like, wait a minute. And I'm looking at it and I noticed that the one that he had hacked was the thing that I did for a week that totally didn't work. And he's charging money for this. And I got to buy this. I got to see so I buy it, right? And keep in mind, he's teaching people how to do something that I did for a week that totally didn't work. So then I buy it and I look at the product and he's totally wrong on everything. Like he's got everything wrong. And that's why people say like, oh, you can just funnel hack your way to millions. It's like, no, not really. Unless you are Miss Cleo, there is 98% of what really makes things work is behind the scenes that you cannot see. And that's why, Tony Robbins said, if you want to be successful, find somebody that's doing what you want to do, model them, and you'll be successful too. Well, Dan Henry says, if you really want to be successful, find somebody that's doing what you want to do and just pay them to show you how. That's the cheat code. That's the easiest way.
Yeah. And to go back to what we were talking about earlier, to draw a parallel to this with music, sure, you could pick up a guitar and figure out how to tune it and then get a book or watch a couple of videos or listen to some songs and figure out how to play. But if you really wanted to progress quickly and maximize your potential, you go take lessons. If you really want to get into it, then you like find someone who's doing exactly the style of music that you want to do. And like, if you could pay, I'm drawing a blank on names right now.
Eddie Van Halen.
If you could pay Ed Van Halen to sit down and teach you how to play his stuff, and you had the money to do that, and Ed was willing to do it and healthy enough to do it, I don't know if you know, but he's had some trouble lately.
Okay. All right.
Well, he's in his mid 60s and he's got a lot of off-road miles on him, but
yeah, no, I bet. So who's the guy from Aerosmith that is like immune to everything?
Joe Perry. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do Joe Perry.
Yeah. So like, if you could just go get this guy to tell you how to do stuff, and then you figure out that, well, okay, this is how you play this song. This is how you do these things, but how do you book the gigs? How do you make the band? How do you write the songs? How do you negotiate the deals so that you get paid to do the thing that you're doing? Completely different level of stuff, and if you just want to be able to, play a Beatles song at a bonfire on the beach somewhere, then that's great. But if you want to go further than that, so like, if you just want to earn an extra $1,500 a month selling something online as a side hustle, that's awesome and great. And you don't really need much else besides this and maybe a couple of other books. But if you want to, do 6 figures a month, you're going to have to make a 6-figure a month level of commitment. And same thing with bending steel, right? With the stuff that I do, but we can draw comparisons all day. I want to make sure that we get all these
money in this industry. This industry, honestly, is a weird thing, because I spent $120,000 in cash to open my bar up in a small town in Spring Hill, Florida. And people will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a business with no direction, but they won't give a online millionaire $1,000, or even $10,000 to teach them exactly how to become an online. That blows my mind, how people will pay $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 for college. They'll spend they'll spend $1 million on a McDonald's franchise just for the name, but they won't pay somebody who's generated $12 million from their laptop. They think, oh, I can't pay this guy, $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever. The most I charge for consulting is $30,000. Mm-hmm. What college can you go to for $30,000? What business can you start for $30,000? But that's the thing. I myself, I've paid people that didn't even sell what I was offering to pay them for. I've paid them $1,000 an hour to show me what they're doing in one little area that I want to know. And the reason I pay them $1,000 an hour is because when you pay somebody $1,000 an hour, they'll do it tomorrow. They'll do it today, and right, they'll do a good job. But if I'm like, well, maybe you could, and they're like, all right, I'll put it on my calendar. Maybe I won't, But I remember one time my friend Molly, I asked her, I said, hey, could you take a listen to some of my sales reps calls and give me your opinion? And she's like, oh, I'm busy. I'm like, I'll pay you $1,000 an hour. She's like, okay, boom, next day does it. Great golden nuggets. I did that with another sales rep that was like a really good sales rep at a colleague of mine's company. I spent maybe like $10,000 on $1,000 an hour calls. And I can tell you right now that I can personally attribute 2 million in sales to that. So you could look at it like, oh, Dan spent 10 grand on having people just do an hour's worth of work. He's insane. Or you could say Dan turned 10 grand into 2 million.
He's insane. You know? It's all in perception. That's right. Well, before we run out of time, I had one more question that I wanted to throw at you, and thank you for that. You talk about that in the book.
Yes.
And you talk about the difference between this is me paraphrasing it back to you. To me, that's the difference between a cost and an investment, right? You can look at it like you either spent 10 grand on $1,000 an hour stuff for these tiny little minute changes, or you can look at it as you invested 10 grand and turn that 10 grand into 2 million. Because if you had a magic machine that you could put $10,000 in and it would spit $2,000 or $2 million back out at you, there's no one that I know that wouldn't go to the bank and get a loan and do that, you know?
Right.
So it's all just a matter of overcoming the fear and believing and having the faith in the process, right?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's getting over the social programming that, you know, I mean, there really is a precedent set where like, oh, you don't need to give millionaires money. And it's like, well, I mean, how, so you won't give a millionaire money, but you'll give somebody that makes 40 grand a year teaching at a college money, and you expect to learn how to make money more from that guy than the millionaire? It just makes no sense.
Definitely.
You know?
Definitely. Well, the last question I wanted to ask you about before we run out of time here, and you talk about this a little bit in the book. There are two words that resonate with me that you use, and it's one of those cases of I agree with everything he says. He's a genius kind of thing, right? But could you talk about your personal definition of and application of that definition of the words focus and clarity? And I'll preface that with a favorite quote of mine is from a guy named Tony Blauer. And he teaches combative martial art, like not sports stuff, which I know you're a jiu-jitsu guy, right?
Yeah, I'm a jits guy.
Yeah, and I've got a long list of martial experiences. I've been punched in the face a lot by people who hit real hard. But
Okay.
That's, again, a conversation for another time. But Tony Blauer's combatives approach, this I don't really know anything about him or his approach, but this quote that I picked up from him probably 10 or 12 years ago has resonated with me and has been something that I've used as a mental filter for everything since then. And that is, the clarity with which we define something determines its usefulness. So yeah. I would love to hear your definition and your application of the terms clarity and focus.
Well, focus is, to me, the ability to choose what not to do. I remember this was years ago. I was doing work for a billionaire named Jeff Brandon. And this guy, it's weird. Whenever he hires somebody, even if it's an outsourced project, he has this weird thing where he wants you to stay at his house for a few days, and he likes to get to know you. So I go down to his house. It's a 20-bedroom house. It's like, it makes my house look like a shack. Across the street is one of Oprah's houses. It's in Boynton Beach, Florida. And this guy is over the top. He paid an artist $1 million to come live at his house for a month and paint paintings. It's crazy. And so I'm talking to him, and we had a moment where I said, hey, can I ask you like just an off topic question? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, what's the biggest piece of advice you can give me in terms of like business and making money and stuff? And he chuckles, you know. And by the way, at this time I was like super poor. And he goes, The most profitable word in the English language is no. He says, I get on probably 50 calls a day, every day. And I might say yes once every 2 weeks. All my time is spent saying no. And I'm like, geez. And that's the thing is focus is really about what not to do. It's about finding the things that move the needle the most and focusing on them and not getting distracted with things that do not move the needle at all. That is focus. As far as clarity goes, is if you ask, there was multiple studies done, and it's in the book. I can't by memory cite it, but there was some studies done on American workers, and what they felt was the biggest thing that would help them do their job better. And it was almost unanimous that they said that a clear expectation of what is expected of them is the number one thing that'll make them do their job better. And so clarity is truly the ability to, with extreme brevity, be able to fully make somebody understand what you're trying to say with brevity. If it takes you, I'll give you an example. If I say, what do you sell? If you go, well, let me tell you a story. Your business has issues. If you say, well, this is how it went, that's a problem. Well, okay. So, no, I should be able to say, what do you sell? And in one crystal clear, short sentence, you should be able to tell me, period. I call it the dinner table test. Imagine you're sitting at dinner with your new boyfriend or girlfriend's parents, and the father leans over and says, what do you do? If you can't, in one sentence, tell him what you do, you have a massive clarity problem in your business. And he needs to understand it, okay? So if you're a speaker and you sell people on how to get paid a high ticket amount per speech by doing these little corporate employee trainings, and you would say, I help speakers grow their speaking business by or without taking on big stages, by focusing on small, highly paid corporate training events. Done. That's it.
As another example, Dan, what do you do?
I teach people how to sell their advice online at scale.
I like that. And just to clarify that, what does at scale mean?
What that means is, to be more clear, because you can, I change how I say it depending on the audience.
Sure.
So for instance, if you were a beginning audience, I would say, I teach you how to sell your advice online for a premium price, right, and without doing live webinars or joint ventures, because that's a big thing that people think they need to do to make a lot of money, is that they need to do, a bunch of live webinars, and they need to do a bunch of joint ventures, and et cetera, et cetera. And
that would be one of the hard things that people avoid, that you were talking about earlier in the call, right?
Yeah, but I don't avoid that because it's hard. I avoid it because it's too complicated and there's an easier way. And I don't mean easier in the sense that, oh, this is easier, I need to avoid what's hard. I mean easier in the sense that there's less moving parts.
Efficiency.
And
efficiency.
It's more efficient. The word easy gets thrown around a lot.
Sure.
So I help people sell their advice for a premium price automatically, meaning the sales happen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you can charge more. I do not teach people how to sell $47 courses. I do not teach people how to sell a $20 course on Udemy. I teach you how to sell what you know for a premium price, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, even $30,000. That's what I teach you how to do. Now you can sell, there's guys out there that charge $500 for a course on how to jump rope, and they make millions from that.
Sure.
And I can teach you how to do that. But if you want to sell something for $20, I'm not the guy for you. But I can teach you how to take that $20 idea and turn it into a $2,000 idea.
I like that a lot. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking time to speak with us today. And that's all the questions I've got for you. If you guys don't have this book, go to digitalmillionairesecrets.com. There's more to this than earning money.
Yeah, it's doing your part to change the world, because if you got to understand, we live in a world where it's socially acceptable to pay 80, 90, $100,000 for college, sink yourself into student debt before you get your foot out in the world, all to wait 4 years to maybe, just maybe, get a $50,000 a year job. But likely you'll just end up working at Chili's. And that is not okay. And there are millions of people out there that have knowledge that can change other people's lives, and that can do their part to, even in a small way, change the world. And if our formal education system is not willing to raise the bar, then we are going to do it ourselves.
I love that.
So if you want to profit from your knowledge and do your part to change the world at the same time, then you need this book.
You do need that book. I appreciate it, Dan. You have shown us a superhuman mentality in a very specific way, and I appreciate you sharing that information with us. I'm Dave Whitley. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good one.